Okay. To continue my initial response to a dialogue between Professor Anton and To Be Serious, this is something that I had in mind before I started the video. Things usually come back to me while I'm doing walk and talks, and for the walk and talk, what I find when I'm sitting down. It's very windy right now. When I'm sitting down, I seem to be, I don't know, there's not the same kind of ideas. Ideas don't really come full circle. They come and they go. When I'm walking, I don't know, I feel like I'm walking through my own mind. I'm capable of coherently going from one place to another, unexpectedly. Maybe it's based out of the stimuli that I come across when in a changing environment, and it's something that you don't get in a stale and unchanging room while looking at a camera. All right, so what was I talking about? What was I going to talk about? Metaphor and different ways of looking at things. Professor Anton was talking about the danger of landing on a kind of way of looking at the world that only acknowledges this kind of stale, objective, matter-of-fact, physicalness of things. And not to say that that's not all that there really is, but these words come with a kind of stereotype, and I think it is a stereotype to think that the real world only consists, the individual person in the real world only consists of a brain. And I think the emphasis should be on only rather than brain, because we know that as far as we know, our mind is in the brain. I mean, we really don't have any reason. We have reason to speculate. We always have reason to speculate, but we don't have reason to say that. People will say that we have people will have their own reasons to say certain things, but in the scientific community, there's only reason to say that our mind is in the brain. But to say that it is only the material, that our mind, that ourselves is only the brain, is to ignore so many more ways, and valid ways, of thinking about things. I'll continue this video. Okay, so what was I saying before? How there's a stereotype, I guess, surrounding naturalism, I guess, or scientific naturalism. And I guess someone who suffers from the stereotype can say, and I'd say many, I don't know whether or not it's a majority or minority of scientists suffer from this kind of, I guess, creativity-killing stereotype, where someone can say, let's say about when talking about the mind, that they can have a brain and say, look here, the human mind. In the human mind, there is only tissue. I remember one of my history of Western philosophy teacher was talking about a woman that went on TV, some kind of famous interview and they're talking about the human mind or the human soul or something, and this one was saying, look, there is only tissue. And the man asked, but what about the human spirit? What about whatever he was talking about? He mentioned admirable qualities that the human mind is capable of, and just says, no, there is only tissue. Now, the problem with this is that it, I think a view like this, not only is it not good for a comprehensive assessment of reality, but it is also an impediment to scientific progress, because when you really look at it, and whenever I talk about this with my science teachers, they will always stress about how important creativity is, how important it is to entertain things in unorthodox ways, in ways that do not match up dryly with the face, with the what do you call it? I guess the first the face-on interpretation of facts. And I guess when you look at, since we're talking about the mind, when you look at that as only what you are capable of seeing right now, only the tissue that you're capable of analyzing, just as any other muscle tissue, etc. The problem is that you are keeping yourself from pursuing I guess something that you have reason to pursue, because our experience of the human brain, you have to remember, it's not only what doctors, what biologists analyze in the lab. We are experiencing our own brain firsthand every waking moment, and we can't just throw all of that out of the window to simply define the human mind. The human mind as only tissue that we can reduce consciousness as something that doesn't exist, something that's only an illusion, and throw all of these philosophical problems about free will or determinism, etc., out the window and say that they don't matter, they're irrelevant. And that is really wasting the opportunity to really find out more about these things, because these things are real. We know them to be real because we experience them. And while we may not be able to understand them in the laboratory yet, it doesn't mean that we should throw them out the window and give up the possibility of ever really finding out the true nature of these things. Okay, a little insert here. When talking in this situation where this person is saying that there is only tissue, we can picture, I guess, an inquiry as to the special attributes that our minds have. Perhaps encompassing in this kind of imaginary setting where society is asking, where is, I mean, the human mind is so special, and we know that there's this brain, but where does the kind of unbelievable but factual sensation of consciousness, of freedom, of all these interesting things, where does this kind of point of view come from? And then they're going to say, well, let's look to the soul. And now the the biologist, the whole biological study comes along, and they show, okay, look, we can't find a soul. What we can find is all in the brain, okay? And it is only tissue. It is uninteresting, it is tissue, it's like anything else. Stop asking about this point of view within the universe that's looking out at the rest of the universe, and stop asking about this. It's not, none of it is, there's nothing special, there's no soul, there's only tissue. Now my response to that, and I think the proper response to that, is saying, really? That's even more fascinating. That means something before that we thought was just, just regular tissue, regular matter, something that we assumed was stale, is actually much more fascinating now that we can see that from basic building blocks of protein and electrical and chemical messages being passed along these fibers and so on and so forth, can bring up the seemingly miraculous appearance of a conscious mind within it. So the response is that no, it's like, it's not to say that there's nothing special. It means, wow, that the tissue itself must be very special. Let's look more. Let's not forget about the human spirit and the conscious conscious existence, and let's not say that it's an illusion, it doesn't exist, and so on. Let's try to look even deeper into, let's maybe we won't find anything. Maybe we will find that it's some kind of deception, but this should be curiosity piquing. We should not be saying the position that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about stereotype. The stereotype is to say that, look at this cold, dry representation of the truth, and let's not look beyond that. This is what there is, there's nothing else. That's what I mean when I say that kind of view is an impediment to scientific progress, because that's not what naturalism, in my eyes, is or should be. It's not necessarily this kind of okay, like, here's the way things are, there's nothing else, because this scientific endeavor is discovery. It's learning and learning from evidence. So really, this kind of attitude of that's what I mean by saying this kind of attitude, that it's only tissue. Really, I don't mind if it's tissue, but the only part is the thing that I'm worried about. It's the discouragement of exploring the things that we find likely, or that we find very real, because we're talking about the conscious human experience. It's something that we know, but that we don't fully understand. We shouldn't just brush it aside and pretend that it's a non-issue, because it is an issue, and we should continue to try to pin it down and to find out what exactly is going on when matter is making connections. What is this weird potential that it has to seemingly awaken itself? So yeah, that's it for the insert. Okay, so to go back to what we were talking about, naturalism and scientific naturalism, trying to define what they are, what they exclude, and what they don't, or what they shouldn't exclude, is that, well, first of all, what I wanted to say is that we really should not look at metaphor, look at poetic expression as something that should not fit with our naturalistic or scientifically naturalistic view of the world. Because I don't know. I think I'll pinpoint that more specifically. But firstly, I will compare it to looking at a poem and saying that this has no bearing. This has no bearing whatsoever on the real world, on real life, and looking at a novel and saying, well, why should I be reading this novel? Why should I be, other than just a means of escapism, why should I be taking the issues in this novel seriously when I already know that it's just lies on paper, just meant to follow the fancy of self-deluding readers and a deluded author that's trying to describe life in the way that it isn't, or looking. Yeah. So now the thing is that taking what we know and finding new and different and ways that might even seem anti-scientific or metaphysical or spiritual, those kinds of ways of rephrasing reality, rephrasing what we know, rephrasing or playing around with definitions or trying to exploit definitions. I think these things are actually beneficial to us. We should not be taking these and saying they don't belong to our scientific endeavors, that they don't belong to the naturalistic way of assessing the world. Because the only way that we can assess the world, I guess, with the greatest potential of discovery, is doing those things. It is looking at what we already know, turning it upside down if you must, in order to find out what every single thing that those facts and that information entails. And I guess the easiest example I can make is the piecing together of the passing on of genetic traits and of agriculture and of wildlife, by Charles Darwin and people that came before him that are less famous for noticing what would be known as evolution. Because all of this stuff or almost all of this stuff, the things behind evolution were known beforehand. We knew how agriculture worked. We realized that how to breed animals, and yet it took a long time before someone looked beyond the cold and stale matter of fact of those things to see what was behind them, to see how these things actually worked. And maybe not even seeing how they worked, because people who were in agriculture understood how evolution worked. They just didn't know to apply it to outside of their own profession, perhaps. So I guess that's all I'll say I'll end the video here. So yeah, I think that's all.